Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lori Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited that we're going to speak with Rachelle Morris. She's a co-founder and managing director of Red Rove Capital. This is a venture capital fund, and I'm particularly excited because women are really underrepresented in this type of role. I've been looking at the statistics, and it's somewhere between as low as 4% in venture capital, women managers or managing directors, up to about 8 or 9%. But this translates down the board as you go, when you start a business, you go and you find funding, capital to start your idea and make your dreams come true. And if you can't find that capital, you can't find that funding to start your business, then a lot of times it doesn't get off the ground unless, like in Kim Collins' case, her father helped her out and gave her a bit of a loan. So I think that it's really important to be more represented as women in these venture capital funds so that more women-owned businesses get started. And as I was looking through the material for today's call, it was just startling to me how far we have yet to go in this space. So I'm really excited to have a chat with Rachelle. She's done a lot with her charity as well, and I'm excited to get started. So Rachelle, thank you so much for joining us. And would you tell me a little bit about your background?
I'm from Houston, Texas originally, and I went to BYU, which is a school in Utah, Brigham Young University. I was the first woman on my mom's side of the family to get a college degree and really had no expectations or anticipation of having a full-fledged career. And when I was a freshman in college, I got introduced to a friend in the dorms whose father had worked at a company called Goldman Sachs. And that was my introduction to Goldman. And I ended up majoring in business, information systems, and got an internship with Goldman Sachs in between my junior and senior year of college. I then ended up working for Goldman for 12 years in their private wealth management division, primarily in the Dallas and Houston offices. And then about 5 years ago, JP Morgan Private Bank called me and recruited me to move to Salt Lake City to launch a private bank office here with a handful of people. So I worked for JP Morgan for 3 years, and it was moving to a new bank, a new city, and a new office all simultaneously. And fortunately, we did that in 2019 rather than launching January 2020 because we had a year on us before COVID hit. And anyways, what was interesting was I did not realize in launching a new office for JP Morgan that what that would really do is that would put me on the radar for lots of other wealth management firms around the country as someone who would be willing to open a new office or do something new, something entrepreneurial in the space above and beyond just building a book of clients. So I ended up opening a Salt Lake office for a multifamily office that's based in Boulder, Colorado called Crestone Capital. So they recruited me to launch that office. And I did that for about 8 months. And then I got the most random phone call of my career in which a person who runs an accelerator in Provo, Utah, which is about an hour south of where I live in Salt Lake City, he called me a year ago, this last May, and an accelerator, what they do is they help startups and young companies. The whole goal is to decrease the mortality rate of startups. And so I had gotten to know, RevRoad is the name of this 2-year accelerator program. I had gotten to know the RevRoad community while building up my books of business at JP Morgan and Crestone, and ended up getting recruited to co-found and launch RevRoad Capital last summer, which is an early stage venture fund. And so my partners and I have raised just a little over $50 million and have invested in 4 companies and are continuing to raise until our final close the end of July. And so anyways, I'm now a VC and I do a little bit of consulting work still in holistic wealth management is what I refer to it as, with a firm called the Norden Group that's based here in Utah. And so I was able to take my 16 plus years of experience in the industry of wealth management and monetize it by partnering with a local firm where I introduced some of my old clients. So I'm still able to work with a few families that I've worked with for many years. And then I also am a referral source for the wealth management firm, but I'm out of the day-to-day portfolio construction and management because I'm focused on my venture fund. So anyways, little did I know that in 2023, I'd have 2 revenue streams for myself personally, both in financial services, one being a VC and the other one being tied to an RIA. So that's the background on me. I love what I'm doing. I'm an accidental VC, but that's where we're at in life, and I'm totally enjoying it. So,
and you do both. You do both RIA and VC at the same time.
Yeah. So I spend about 5 hours a week on the RIA work. It's literally just being a trusted person with the families who I've been working with, and then collaborating with my partners over at the RIA. But I'm out of the day-to-day portfolio construction and management. So it ends up being about 5 hours a week. And then the venture fund is all consuming above and beyond that.
Are you doing the same thing that you did in these other roles where you're kind of setting up the office for success and then there's like an exit plan? Or is this with the venture capital, or is this a little bit different?
So I'm a venture capitalist. So I am in the roles of a venture fund. It is, so it's just me and my 3 partners are the only roles that we have. You could have analysts, and we probably will at some point in time. Okay. So a venture fund is a non-revenue generating company. The only way that we keep the lights on is through our management fees to be able to pay for us and pay our legal fees and whatever else that we need to do to function. So with like any sort of venture fund or private equity fund that gets pitched to LPs, do y'all have venture funds and private equity funds on your platform?
We do have the option. We don't necessarily put a lot of money in that direction, but there are some.
Okay.
I've worked with them before. But I think that, an explanation would be great.
Okay. So when you look at the fund documents, either a PPM or just a pitch deck for a fund, the fund will always provide the terms. And so in venture capital, the standard terms are 2 and 20. So a 2% annual management fee and then 20% carry that gets split to the GP versus the LPs. And when you look at a later stage private equity fund, a lot of times it's going to be 1 to 2% management fee. So a lower management fee and maybe also lower carry, because the expectations are that there are going to be more companies inside the fund that the fund invests in that will end up having a positive outcome. Whereas when you're investing in venture, you're investing in very early stage companies, are usually anywhere from 1 to 3 years old max. And so there's a lot to prove. And at least 40% of the companies that we invest in, we anticipate ending up not really working out. We'll just say it that way. So the goal is to get a grand slam inside of the 15 companies. We'll probably invest in about 15 companies inside of our fund. And then we'll raise another fund to be able to invest in 15 more companies. So anyways, the roles of a venture fund, you need people who can fundraise. Otherwise, you don't have a fund. And then you also need to figure out a way in which you get deal flow so that you're looking at companies that have really great founders, going after a really big market opportunity, and, potentially like becoming billion-dollar plus enterprises, even though they're like baby companies at this point, they're startups. And then you also need, when you think of jobs to be done on the fund, and then also people who are skilled at negotiating term sheets, kind of the nuts and bolts of financial modeling, DCF, right? Figuring out valuation of the companies that we're investing in, to be able to say, hey, we want to buy 10% of your company at this valuation. And so let's get a deal together. And you're usually competing against other funds as well. So anyways, when you think about the jobs to be done inside of a fund, inside of a venture fund, you need to be able to fundraise. You need to be able to get looks at good deals, and you need to be able to win those deals. And that's kind of it. And then supporting your investments once you've made the investment. So supporting the portfolio companies that you've invested in. So my partners and I, those are the jobs that we cover. That's what we do. So I spend all of my time either pitching potential LPs and trying to get folks and family offices to invest in our fund. And then we call capital as we do deals. So I spend my time doing that. Spend my time with founders, so entrepreneurs, getting to know them, right? Getting to understand the business that they're building. Mm-hmm. And then also collaborating with the portfolio companies that we already have and figuring out ways to be helpful to them. For example, I helped one company recently get connected, like run the process of hiring a PR person, like a consultant for them. And so they had never gone through that process before as individuals or as a team. And so I kind of mentored and shepherded them through that and helped them run a process and interview really good candidates, and then be able to select the publicists that they chose to go with. So doing all sorts of things like that.
You wear a lot of hats in that role, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
So when you came out of college, you went straight into like wealth management, like an advisory sort of role?
Yeah. So I was an analyst at Goldman Sachs and went from being an analyst to associate to VP, working, in my analyst days. It was a lot of behind the scenes work and kind of more operational functions for clients. So client needed to wire money or execute a trade or update their paperwork for compliance purposes, putting together client meeting materials for the, senior advisors I was working with. Then that's kind of the work that I was doing in my analyst associate years, which I feel like, when I look at my 12 years at Goldman in total, it was like a talent incubator for me, where so much of my development just happened by just showing up day after day in the office with really smart, capable people and absorbing and learning from them and having CNBC on and just watching what was going on, both like in markets, geopolitically, consumer trends, and how clients behaved with everything when it came to their money. And just absorbing that and then watching and learning from my senior advisors on how to navigate conversations when performance is killing it, conversations when performance is not going that well, and just being a student of the industry, and learning from people who had figured out a way to be successful in building up a client book and gaining. And what building up a client book really essentially means is gaining trust from people to manage their money. Mm-hmm. And so figuring out a way to do that. And there's so many different ways to do it that, I think it's important to find advisors who you naturally resonate with and take notes from them, but then also come up with your own personal touch and style and story, because that's ultimately what people are going to, that's you can't be somebody else. So people are going to feel that authenticity, and authenticity, especially I feel like as a woman in the industry, is so critical. Authenticity, strength, and then also warmth are all just really critical, sometimes hard to accomplish, but it's a way that you can be differentiated from so many people inside the industry.
Yeah, I think that those are all good points. How did you get that? You talk about mentorship a little bit, learning from the people that already have it figured out. And that's kind of been a theme that's come up in these talks a lot. How did you reach out and ask for other opportunities as far as like that learning and growth piece? Or how did you get to a place where it doesn't just naturally happen? People usually don't come up to you and say, "Hey, do you want to learn this thing?" Like, how did you grow that way?
Yeah, well, okay, two things. One is, and this got beat into our heads early in my analyst days, which is no one cares about your career as much as you do. So you are in the driver's seat of your career. Other people can help by being navigators for certain road trips that you're on or whatever. So mentors play different roles in your career development. And if you have just one mentor, then you don't have enough mentors, because one mentor will be able to help you navigate in one road trip or a series of road trips, or maybe just being a baseline, like, just person in life. But you will want to have a whole, I don't know, you will want, just like in a portfolio that we manage for our clients, you are going to want to have a diversified set of mentors in which, depending on the situation that you're in life, you're able to pull on those different strengths of your mentors. And I also kind of categorize mentors into two buckets. And I think that both are really important, especially in the first 10 years of your career or 15 years. Bucket number one is someone who is familiar with what you're doing in your day-to-day work. And so those mentors are individuals where I feel like the greatest way to build a relationship with them is by figuring out a way to be helpful to them in what they're doing, and they know your day-to-day job. And so how they reciprocate value to you is by investing in your development on the day-to-day job that you're in right now. So to me, that's like tactical mentoring. I've noticed in my career that those mentors are super important for the current chapter that you're in. And then once you leave that chapter, you do something else in your life, or they move on and do something else, that relationship kind of gets backburnered, because the value of the relationship came in the tactical day-to-day. And it's like, it's a super important relationship in that moment of time for you. And the first couple of times that you go through this process of having like a work best friend or work, a work big sister or a big brother, or, just someone where you can confide in on, just the day-to-day things, and they're investing in helping you gain your greater skill set in your day-to-day function. The first time that relationship kind of gets backburnered, it's hard to digest, because they played such an important, almost like, I don't want to say significant other, but like kind of just, wow, this person, I spent so much time with them and now I spend no time with them. And our relationship was built upon a foundation of us collaborating together, and like me working on projects that could give them capacity to be able to work on things that they actually really want to work on. Well, I'm gaining skills by taking on this work from them, and then they're investing in my development. So that relationship's super important. It's more transactional nature as you build your career. And then the second group of mentors, which is harder to build and takes more time, but it can be very strategic, is like a board of directors in your life. And your board of directors will not, for the most part, not understand who sits next to you in the office, who your clients are. Like that is not, they're not in your life to talk about your day-to-day. Your board of directors is in your life to think through, Riley, what are your strengths as a human being? And how are you building and growing and developing your strengths as a human being? And what do you want to do with your career over the next 5 years? And how do I help you achieve those goals? But those are bigger and more broad than the day-to-day. And so in your board of directors kind of mentors, it could be, an old professor, it could be a friend's parent when you're thinking about natural connections, it could be a client of yours. I still keep in touch with a few of my old clients who I don't actually manage any of their money anymore, but really important humans in my life, just as far as like very broad coaching and human development. So, because I'm working on being one of the senior executive women in the entire state of Utah, regardless of industry. And so how do I keep developing my executive skills, my executive presence? Well, I have to find people who've done that themselves, been CEOs of companies, have amassed tremendous wealth in their lives, right? And so board of directors, they're usually people where it doesn't take much to maintain that relationship, because it's like you might only talk to them 2 or 3 times a year, right? Or it could be someone who you see frequently, but that relationship is more about the high level growth.
If you had to reach out and find someone to be on your board of directors, it isn't somebody that kind of has grown organically. Where would you go? What resources would you use to choose somebody to?
Well, it's just that I don't know. I can only speak to like Utah. I think,
and that's fine. Tell us where we'd go in Utah.
Right. I think it's more about the process. I don't want to provide coaching that isn't applicable, but it's more of the process of what are things that I care about above and beyond my day-to-day job. Mm-hmm. And then get involved in an organization where you build community with that. And by getting involved in an organization, a nonprofit, right, then you're able to meet people through that network. And with building out a personal board of directors, this isn't a test. This isn't a class either. This is like literally your life. So who are people who you admire, and then just figure out a way to build a relationship with them. If you're not willing to either, like, if like, for example, okay, here's a copy of Utah Business Magazine. All right. And let's say you don't know this woman personally on the cover, but you have been tracking what she's been doing on LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever, and is a local person, lives in the community. It's on you to figure out a way to get in her inbox and say, hi, I read your article in Utah Business, and I just admire what you've done and blah, blah, blah. I was wondering if I could take you to lunch sometime over the next month. Here are some dates that work well for me. Do any of these potentially work for you? Right. I would love to meet and get acquainted.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good suggestion, a good way of networking. Let's talk a little bit about your volunteer work, because I know you do a lot, especially to empower and grow young women. How did you get involved in that, and what spoke to you in that space?
Yes. How did I get involved? I think activity breeds activity. And then just being someone who is willing to be helpful in big or small tasks and actually following through and doing those tasks, then it helps build your personal brand in the community. So yeah, I mean, I think just going to a nonprofit, or I think sometimes I would find out about specific nonprofits through clients or potential clients, and then going and visiting, like, for example, there's a shelter for victims of domestic violence in the state of Utah. That was kind of the first nonprofit in Utah that I got involved with. And it all happened from a potential client of mine who never became a client of mine at JP Morgan, but is now an investor of mine in my fund. So like, you just never know when the business is really going to work out with some of these prominent folks. But she had chaired the capital campaign for Peace House, which is the Center for Victims of Domestic Violence. And they were building the new shelter at the time when she and I were getting to know each other. And so she asked if I wanted to tour the construction site. And I said, absolutely. And so I just went and toured the construction site. And then I met the executive director of the shelter. And then I ended up through JP Morgan hosting a fundraiser for the center. And so it's just, you just have to start checking out nonprofits that are in the community and figure out the one where the mission and purpose and then the people who are running the nonprofit resonate with you. Because if someone tells you, hey, you should go volunteer at the YWCA, but then you go to the YWCA and no one inside the building is really like clicking with you naturally, like, you're not going to end up really spending that much time serving at the YWCA. But if you find out through magazine or social media about some sort of nonprofit, or through your friends, and you go to a charity lunch for that group and the stories there resonate, and you end up donating to the nonprofit, like, chances are you're probably going to, that might be a great organization to get involved with, because you feel it and you're giving some money, whether it's, $25,000 or $25, it still is something that's resonating with you and getting involved, and then going from there. So, and I think an important thing to consider is it's okay to serve with a nonprofit for 1, 2, 3 years and rotate to a different, like, you don't, just because you pick a nonprofit to support doesn't mean that you're stuck only supporting that specific one, or that you can't take on other projects as well. And, it's kind of the nonprofit's job to keep you engaged as a community advocacy person. So
how do you find time to do your nonprofit work on top of your day job? Because your day job is huge.
Yeah. So I don't care about work-life balance. Don't care about it at all. Straight up. Like, I'm sorry, we're in a capitalist society. And I realized by the time I was turning 30 years old that people who wake up and work out first thing in the morning, I never hear about them being depressed. And they're also all highly successful people. So I just decided that's it. I'm going to start waking up really early in the morning. I'm going to start working out, and made that decision right before my 30th birthday. And like, starting your day off by being selfish just for yourself with a workout, regardless of what's going on in life. And I mean, besides like having, a newborn baby or something like that, where you literally can't, but just figuring it out. And sometimes in life that meant that I'm working out at 5 a.m. to get that morning workout in. In fact, I did that for years. And at this point in time, I'm like going to the gym at 7 a.m. So it's different. I'm in a different chapter, but regardless, like, I start my day off with a workout for myself. And by doing that, it actually kickstarts the rest of my energy for the day. And then I am intentional about blending my professional life and my personal life together. So my big why in life is building community and moving the needle for women and girls in the state of Utah without disenfranchising all the great men who also live in our state. And so with that as my energizing big why of what I do every day, then my work inside the venture fund folds into that. My work with the Norden Group, the RIA, and the handful of significant families I still work with, that blends into that. My work in politics blends into that. My work in nonprofits and board service blends into that. And I'm connecting people, I'm fundraising for different things, and I'm building community while I have this personal flywheel going. And so, for example, yesterday, Sunday, I went to church. I got on my Instagram stories to talk about a political campaign that's going on right now. I had friends from the neighborhood come over because they're helping out with the political campaign because I made a call to action for volunteer help. And so 3 friends swung by. So I'm hanging out with friends, but it's about the campaign, so it doesn't feel like work to me. And I'm showing them my tomato plants and things like that, right? Then I go to dinner with a couple who is considering being LPs of my fund, so investors in my fund. And they had their daughter join halfway through dinner who just started an internship at Goldman. And I'm helping her network this summer with different people. And then after that, I went to the political candidate's home for a fundraising strategy meeting till midnight or whatever. So that was my Sunday. And I had a fantastic Sunday. And it was all the work and the life blended together. But I would never do that if it was a political candidate who I couldn't care less about or who didn't personally resonate with me. And I wouldn't have given up my Sunday dinner to meet with people who weren't either family or potential investors of mine. Right. And so I'm very intentional. And I did the Instagram stories yesterday afternoon because I knew that I had capacity to do it, in a relaxing time window of my life. I can't get on Instagram right after this and do that series of stories, but I could on Sunday, and friends could swing by my house and hang out afterwards.
That's great.
Is that helpful on?
Yeah. So you build intentional connections in your relationships so that, or maybe it's a better way of saying that you do what you love. So sometimes it doesn't feel like work when you're doing it.
I've spent a lot of time and continue to figuring out what really energizes me, and then figuring out a way to make money and have positive results and outcomes above and beyond money.
But how did you figure that out? Was it just thinking about it, or deep thought, or did you have a process you use to kind of figure out what energizes you, what makes you?
Oh, I think different personality types will handle this in different ways, but I think it's a process of discovery that takes years, and recognizing that sometimes I was doing things because I was being voluntold to do them. And sometimes it worked out and other times it didn't. And then going through a process of doing personal postmortems of being well, why was this energizing for me? And why was this not energizing? And sometimes the baseline of it was because this was energizing because I picked it, and this one wasn't energizing because I was told to do it. And I didn't like the fact that I was being told to do something. And I have a maverick personality type. And so when someone comes down and is in a commandeering way trying to tell me what I should be doing, I really resist that. Right. And so it kind of was okay, well, then also, how do I create a career path where and that was part of this becoming an entrepreneur inside the industry is turns out I actually have the entrepreneurial spirit inside of me, where I kind of like the fact that this is 10:40 on a Monday morning, and I can be on a Zoom with you guys, and I have zero stress that there is a partner of mine who is going to be calling me and saying, hey, what are you up to right now? Because I don't have a boss. I have partners who I work with, right? But that is just a process of discovery over a long period of time. And that was something that was critical to me, was feeling autonomy for myself and my schedule. And I'd say like the first several years of my career was doing work that basically other people were creating for me, and just doing a really good job at the work that was being assigned to me, and then learning how to be really skilled at that, right? There was a point in my career, especially when moving to JP Morgan and moving to Utah, in which I was then responsible for creating most of my work. And it can be very daunting going through that transition period. But if you go through, like, the risk reward potential is so much higher from even just a financial perspective, and then also from a managing your time perspective, if you can successfully go through that bridge from I do work that people put on my plate to I make the work, right, that I put on my plate. Oh, and now I'm creating plates for other people from this work that I'm creating. And so now I've somehow also created jobs too in this process. And I'm making more money, and I have more autonomy over my schedule, which then gives me the freedom to pick up other things that I feel like all is part of the flywheel of my personal machine.
Mm-hmm. I like that idea of postmortem, of going through after you finished a situation, or you finished an assignment, and kind of looking at, well, did that energize me? Did that add to my personal mission statement, or my personal vision of where I wanted to be? And is that the direction I want to put more of my effort into? I really like that idea.
Yeah, well, and there could be years in which all the work that you're doing is just draining work, so then, and it's not energizing work for yourself. So then you got to, be able to have the individual postmortems on the weekend or whatever at night to be able to say, okay, why am I doing this? Like, the work itself is not energizing for me right now. Oh, I actually am making a lot more money this year than I was last year. Okay. Like, is this okay? Well, then how am I going to value that extra money that I'm making? Like, I need to put a personal value on that. Like, so what am I, and this literally happened in my life. So I know that it's possible, right? So then it's like, oh, I'm going to max out my 401k for the first time ever, right? And I am going to go to Europe this year on vacation. And I'm also going to open up like an investment account, right? And it was kind of like late analyst, early associate years and I just saved as much money as I possibly could, because I was just like, okay, you know what? Work isn't really that fun these days, but I am attacking this with the perspective of like, I'm making an extra $40,000 compared to what I was last year, which was like a big raise at that time in my life. So what am I doing with that extra money that I'm making, right? And so then the job became digestible, because I was in control of, like, I was the one who was calling the shots in my life, even though the job itself wasn't that energizing. So then I ended up killing it in my job, even though I didn't really love the work that I was doing that year. So then I got a much bigger bonus, right? Much higher pay. But it was because I figured that out for myself, rather than feeling like, oh, I'm just like, oh, work isn't that fun. or energizing right now, and, oh, but I'm making more money and feeling the golden handcuffs. Is just like, no, this is the way that I'm making six figures right now in my life. And so what am I going to do for myself personally, because I'm in this new, income bracket?
Did you also have a sense of like, this is where I want to go and I need to spend some time in this space in order to get where I want to go?
No. No. You
just made it through.
Yeah. I mean, some years are years of questions and other years are years of answers and realizations. And it's okay to have years where it's just like, I don't really know where I'm going or what I'm doing, but I am crushing it in this regard, like right now for my personal balance sheet, or whatever the scenario is that gives you that sense of like, I'm in control.
And there are years like that, truthfully. There truthfully are just years where you're like, I don't love this, but there's other places I can put my, I can find that fulfillment. So going back to like the original kind of purpose, what do you wish you would have known as you're coming up and working on your way through things? What do you wish that someone had said, hey, do this, or this tip is, try this, or maybe they did actually say that and you're glad they did so that you could get where you're at today?
Yeah. Okay. I think number one is that in my early years in my career, I never asked for raises, and I wish that I had done that, but I kind of operated from this place of fear and just gratitude for the job at Goldman. That was just like, okay, like I'll take whatever you are going to pay me. Like I did not manage those conversations effectively at all. So I have been very intentional in helping women who are early in their careers figure out a way of like a framework of how to talk through compensation with managers in a way that conveys confidence, but also being a realist and collaborative in nature. So that was number one. Probably left, $50,000 to $100,000 of earnings on the table during those first, handful of years of my career, simply because I just didn't ask for more money. Maybe even more than that, maybe $150,000, $200,000 that I missed out on. Okay. Number two is something that a mentor taught me to do early in my career is to go through worst case scenario planning when there's lots of uncertainty going on in life at the moment. So example, what was happening in life? Financial crisis, great financial crisis, markets bottomed 60% down. Lehman Brothers went out of business. Bear Stearns was acquired by JP Morgan. Goldman Sachs, it was like, depending on the day on CNBC, it was things were not great. And so there's a lot of fear.
So she said she's not able to get back on. She said, anyway, my worst case scenario was that I would lose my job. Then I scenario planned for what I would do if that happened. And then I didn't have to worry about that worst case scenario because I had a reasonable plan to execute. So I've actually heard that before. First speaker, Lacey, said that they went through that worst case scenario training and then did planning for how to make it a little bit better each time.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I've been really excited to talk to Rachelle and hear about her journey and what an amazing person she is. If you guys want more information about Rachelle, I'll put notes and links in the notes for this podcast that include the Rev Road Capital, the company that she works for, and the charitable organization that she donates to and gives her time to. Rachelle was actually one of our original presenters. And so since her presentation has come out, she's actually started to run for Salt Lake County office. And I'll put a link to that as well. I'm always excited to see women going into public service and going into the government. So that's super exciting. So I'll put all those links down there and you guys can find Rachelle in lots of different places. So thanks so much for joining us today and listening to Rachelle's story.